Okay, it's connecting with the live streaming service now. I'm going to go in the background.
All right, welcome to our morning sessions. We're here with Dick Howard and Lisa Burns for a Healthy Lakes Initiative. Dick is a healthcare, philanthropy, environmental, and community leader with over 30 years experience in nonprofit leadership and governance. His undergraduate and graduate work concentrates on biology, limnology, public health administration, environmental health, and he's an executive leader in the healthcare operations, process improvement, strategy, planning, marketing, community relations, philanthropy, and business development at Fairview Health Services, Minneapolis. He also serves as the president of R.J. Howard & Associates, a firm dedicated to advancing organizations to achieve higher performance and community benefit, engaged in fundraising to impact climate change throughout lakes, rivers, and shoreline restoration, native plantings, and a diversion of runoff into waterways. So Dick has a really diverse background, which is great for a board director or a board member. He's got both the organizational and the environmental background, which I love to see. We also have Lisa Burns from Washburn County, Land and Water Conservation Department, and she implements many AIS, education, prevention, and planning programs that assists with upland invasive species management, shoreline restoration, and manages the annual tree, shrub, and wildflower sale. In her free time, she enjoys fishing, spending time on the river, and relaxing by the fire. So we got a couple of experienced people here for us today, and they're going to talk to us about the project that they put together in kind of galvanizing a diverse group of lake people around enhancing and protecting their lake. With that, I'll turn it over to Dick, and if you do have questions, make sure you put them in the Q&A tab, not the comment tab, and they will be taking questions during the session instead of at the end. So if you have something you see on the screen you have a question about, feel free to pop your question in there and I will grab it right away. All right, thank you.
Derek, thank you for the introduction, and thanks to Tony in the background for setting this up. And I'm delighted to be with Lisa to give you a background on how we moved forward with this shoreline restoration and enhancement for Matthews Lake. You see in the background of this slide the beautiful lake that we have, and it's one that we are very, very devoted to as the Matthews Lake Association. So we're pleased to be able to have this discussion with you and encourage you to do even more than what we have. I'm a little humbled by your introduction, Derek, because even when you go into doing something like this, you're always learning. So appreciate the introduction. You know, before we get started, Lisa, do you want to make any comments? I guess we got our formal introductions done, but anything you wanted to say on the front end too, please?
No, I guess from my perspective, I have not been on Matthews Lake until 2020, and I was on there probably 15, 20 times. So I really kind of got to know the lake really well, and it's beautiful, and the people that we got to work with were awesome. So happy to be part of this little journey.
Great, thank you, Lisa, and we're delighted to have you here. So that we can get to know you a little bit better as participants, we do want to have you just answer a couple quick questions on our poll. So Derek, if they can find that poll, I think it's in the upper right-hand corner of your view as participants. So the questions were, have you participated in the Healthy Lakes Grants Program? Kind of yes, no, or you plan to. So check one of those. And then the second question, if you answered yes, so you're participating in the Healthy Lakes Grants Program, which practices or disciplines have you put on into the grant and on your lake, whether it's native plantings, diversion, rain gardens, fish sticks, rock filtration. So if you could just answer those questions for us, we'll come back in a little bit and see a little bit about our audience. We'll make sure we're tailoring our responses to who you are. So if I can get to that next slide, there we go. So we talked about our background, and just the whole purpose of this presentation is really convey the process that we're going through to protect and enhance a lake through shoreland restoration and management. So we want to touch on the background and really how we cultivated interest over a longer period of time, but a very intense period of time, as Lisa mentioned, in 2020, to move this grant process forward. You know, our process for doing that and kind of building community, continue to build community around the lake, around this particular work of protecting our lake. Third part is just getting to yes. You know, we call that herding cats. You know, lakeshore landowners are part-time people. They're going in different directions. So how to do that in the middle of a pandemic was interesting, but we did it very successfully, I believe. Talk about the grant submission and getting organized for that implementation. And again, make sure that we have time for your questions, the Q&As throughout the presentation. You know, this is really our first initiative into shoreland management. And as always, you're learning all the way along. And I don't know, Lisa, if you want to comment too about that first round with Matthews Lake. Just it's a learning process.
Yeah, and I think you guys basically ran with this as well as you could. I know there was a lot going on, and I guess I hope that people who are watching this morning are taking this to heart and really thinking about their lake group, or maybe they don't have a lake association, and trying to get involved in protecting your lake and knowing that there's going to be a lot of resources for you to be working with throughout the state to make that happen.
Good. Thank you, Lisa. So just a little introduction to Matthews Lake. We are in the northwest section or region of Wisconsin in Washburn County. It's not a huge lake, but good size, 267 acres. And again, I think as Lisa said, having a lake association that is very interested and dedicated to this work really makes a difference, and that takes some cultivation. Our mission, as you see listed here, is really dedicated to preserving our lake and resources on Matthews Lake in northern Wisconsin for the benefit of the general public. This is a public trust. This lake is a public trust, so we know that it's being used by more than just the landowners, so we want to make sure that we are enhancing that as much as possible for the public. We have 44 members. We have 59 landowners around the lake, but 44 members are in the Matthews Lake Association. And so a very strong segment of our landowners are actually involved in our lake association, which has a pretty long tenure. I think, I don't know exactly, but I think we've been probably around about 20 some years. So I've been on this lake for 30 years, and it's been a very active group and continue to get more active. Could we, Derek, can you show us the results of the poll maybe, if it's available?
It is here. I'll share with what I've got so far.
And if you haven't answered, answer quick. I do have to say that while he's doing that, you know, we live in a country that's a little divided on occasion, but I have this real opportunity. I live in Minneapolis, and I've been on this lake since 1990. So when it comes to my divided loyalties, it's Packers or Vikings. So I have this luxury of when the Vikings aren't doing so well, I can enjoy the Packers, and the Packers aren't doing so well, I can enjoy the Vikings. But lately, I think I'm enjoying the Packers more. Just it's nice to have both options.
We got a few people answering here still, Dick.
Okay. Should we come back?
Yep, we'll come back. Just continue forward.
All right,
with that.
no problem. So doing this is both a combination to me of the intellect of using the science and the resources available, but it's also about really loving a lake. And I tell you that our lake association, and I can speak for myself, just love this lake. But as our DNR representative would say, we are tending to love our lakes to death. There's just, and particularly during COVID, the activity level has been absolutely incredible on our lake. So our lakes in Northwest Wisconsin are really feeling the pressure. I know that in Minnesota, many of the lakes are almost unswimmable. So we take that very, very seriously. We are sometimes loving our lakes to death, but it is a passion for this lake that we have that it really encourages us to do this. One of the things that we need to do in that regard is slow the aging of a lake. And in a minute, I'll talk a little bit about eutrophication. I'm sure I have a number of people on this call that are very familiar with that succession of lakes, but it's just a reminder that we need to do things to slow that process down. And you know, again, as part of this, when I call Matthews Lake the middle-aged beauty, you'll get that in a minute when I talk about eutrophication. It's not a derogatory term, but it's a middle-aged lake, and actually that's how the state of Wisconsin classifies that. But we have a long history of concerted efforts. This has been over decades. We have a Clean Boats, Clean Waters inspection program that's very active with inspectors at the boat landings. We have put invasive species detection surveys and inspections in place. We have people constantly monitoring the lake. Well, it's not hard when you go around the lake at happy hour on your pontoon or fishing in your boat to look at erosion and the evidence of any invasives. So that's a constant reporting we have. A lot of education at our lake association. And we did receive a grant last year for education and planning. And we've actually completed a whole lake aquatic plant survey. And Lisa, I don't know if you want any comments on the lake, the plant survey?
Yeah, so I got to help the contractor a couple days go out and do some of the whole lake aquatic plant surveying, and it's pretty impressive. Again, for not being on the lake, it was pretty clear. The water was super nice. There was plants at almost every spot, and we even came across some plants at 25 feet, which shows that the water clarity was pretty darn good out there for the sunlight to get down. So yeah, I thought overall saw a lot of fish, saw a pretty nice northern swimming around, so some really good vegetation out there.
Yeah, and the punchline of that is, what did we not find?
Invasive species.
Which is the, you know, the whole plant survey is important to set that baseline, but knowing we don't have invasive species and knowing that they are fairly close to our lake, it certainly gives us some celebration. Thanks, Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
We've also initiated research on just septic systems and what their impact is. You know, we've been monitoring through the SWIMS program, monitoring all the lake water quality and seeing some fluctuations in phosphorus, which certainly could be septic systems. It could be more likely runoff from the lakes, which is again why this you know, shoreland enhancement and restoration is so important. But again, right now we're working on an overall lake plan through this Healthy Lakes and Rivers Grants process. So in April and May, we'll be having public hearings with our lake landowners and the community just about where we're headed with this lake. So we're kind of putting those pieces together. The baseline, the plant survey, we're doing our inspections, we're doing our monitoring, and now this shoreland enhancement's been such an important part of that. So we hope by the end of the year to have a pretty comprehensive plan for the lake going forward.
And can I just step in here
please.
real quick?
Yeah, please.
So I just wanted to say you guys are doing a really awesome job with all of this, and I feel like there's probably a lot of other groups looking at this and saying, yeah, this is great. We're even doing this on our lake. And if you're not doing it and you're interested, just again reach out to, you know, the Wisconsin DNR lake biologist in your county. There's all kinds of different monitoring and evaluating that you can be doing. So thanks to everybody out there that's already doing some stuff.
Yeah, and I just underscore that the resources that Wisconsin's provided to us has been phenomenal in Washburn County as well. So back to my little comment about a middle-aged beauty, and this is probably elementary for some people, but you know, lakes have succession. They are in a natural process of aging. As I said, eutrophication, or maybe I didn't say, that's Greek for well-fed. So what we're trying to do is slow this process down as much as possible. And I called Matthews Lake a middle-aged beauty, and technically it's a mesotrophic lake. So it's in this category. We're probably kind of maybe right about here. We've got plenty of vegetation, as Lisa noted, good fish population, and we monitor that on a regular basis too. And we're kind of heading into this period. So we want to slow this down as much as possible and not end up at this particular level. So just reminding people that that's really what this is all about, is whatever means we can do to slow that process down is critical to our lake and to your lake as well. So maybe, Derek, do we have the poll
I've
available
got the
now?
poll here, so I'm gonna try to share with my screen here. And
Drum roll, please. There we go.
all right, do you see my
Yeah.
screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have people that have, can you go to number 1?
Hold
Question?
on here. I've got a lot of screens open, so
That's okay. Take your time. We're
the
with
same
you.
one?
Same
Same
one.
one I had before, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Screen 1 was just if they're participating or not.
Well, why do I have multiple ones of the same? Hold on here.
And we can work with that too if that's what you can find. So
Oh, here we go, I think. There we are.
hey, great.
Hmm.
So we have roughly half of the population participants are, have participated in the grants program. Good to see that 13% are planning to do so, and great that 40% are just wanting to learn more, and others just thinking about it, not sure right now. Next, can we go to the next slide? Any thought there, Lisa? I'm sorry.
Oh,
It's okay.
that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
great to see. And
Yeah.
going back to the next one, it'd be interesting to see the practices.
Yeah,
So Derek, if you could bring that one up.
yeah. And we say the word practices, we mean those, and Lisa will talk more about what that means, but it's just, there are certain things that this Healthy Lakes grant will support, and you see them listed here. So a lot of people are doing the native plantings. Not so much rain gardens, which is interesting. Diversion to keep water out of the, well, actually, rain gardens is a fairly significant one. Fish sticks, which we have done in our lake. Fish sticks, for those that don't know what that means, it's basically putting logs and adhering them to the shoreline so that it's habitat for fish, particularly bass. So, and yeah, then some diversion. So this is a good mix of practices. Any thoughts, Lisa, there?
Nope, nothing else.
Okay. I guess I have to go back and share my screen to get back to the presentation. Okay. Are there any other questions that have come up, Derek, besides the poll? Anything that's come up as questions about just the background on Matthews Lake, our lake association?
I got one question here about, are you getting landowners to put down native shorelines versus lawns to the edge of the lake?
Yeah, the answer is yes. We have a few lawns down to the lake that are rapidly disappearing with native plantings, and we also are blessed to have a lake that's, while it's had a significant amount of development over the last couple of years, there's good setbacks and people have left a lot of native shorelines. So Lisa, your observations on that too.
Yep, and I guess we'll get into that a little bit too as we go.
Yeah.
Some of these sites. Yep.
Okay.
But overall, yeah.
Yeah, if you're going to address these questions later, just defer them to that point.
Yeah.
Another one, are you monitoring the impact of septic systems on the lake?
That is the question. We are actually going to be doing that. We're doing research right now through our Healthy Lakes education grant on what does that mean to monitor septic systems and how do you best do that. There are lots of ways to do it. Our premise is we're seeing some increase in phosphorus. We don't know if that's septic systems, but we've had a lot of conversation with our lake association about it, and they're expecting us to do some sort of monitoring and education and monitoring about that. So the monitoring's not in place yet, but we're going to see what's the best way to do that. And the truth be told, I've seen a number of landowners already replacing their septic systems because they're concerned there is a leakage. So great question. It's an important element. But I'd also say I think runoff from the shoreline is probably more critical to the nutrients that are going into a lake. Thank you. We'll move on. How are we doing for time, Derek? We're pretty good. So we're going to go through, kind of talk about the 3 phases that we went through to get to this point of submitting the grant and then now implementing. So I know the Wisconsin guide for the grant has probably about 5 phases, and we tried to slim these down to 3. And again, to reinforce, there are just excellent resources for this process. So we've really done three phases. One is education and engagement for our landowners. 2, discussions with our lake association landowners about those practices you just saw around the lake. And 3, the third phase is really just implementing of the plans itself. So how do we engage the landowners? Again, as I said, trying to build community around the lake is so important, but also community around this work. So we've done a lot of work on in education on invasive species, you know, and then also discussions over the years on the value of native plantings and shoreline restoration. Now that did not get a lot of uptake some years ago. It was informational, and I really credit the fact that this grant became available as a real catalyst for doing that. And then, you know, we do regular semi-annual water quality reports. And that's piqued people's interest in why we're seeing some changes in the condition of the water. We do fisheries reports. So all these things have been sort of educating the lake about the lake itself. And then we applied for the planning grant last year, and so now we're continuing that particular process. So continuing that, you know, the most important part for the landowner is really to understand the grants and the application process, and more so just understanding the grants. And I've said it, I'm going to repeat it maybe more than once. That, you know, it is certainly about the financial opportunity, but more it was such a catalyst to move forward with the shoreline restoration and enhancement. And I use the word shoreline restoration and enhancement because I think it's more than just restoring. That is true in some cases, particularly where there's been you know, high water has eroded some of the shoreline, but it's also about really enhancing that, and that was really attractive to people. But I think the other point is it's got to be of interest to landowners. And some were interested because of erosion of the shoreline. Some were interested because they wanted to beautify their shoreline. So we needed to appeal to that interest. Also, the fact that it was what I call the official nature of the grants. It came from the state of Wisconsin. We had people like Lisa from the county involved. And we'll talk a little bit more about Linda Anderson from Washburn County Lakes and Rivers Association, which was so instrumental. Her knowledge of aquatic-scaping, as I call it, and showing the beauty that could be done with the shoreline plantings was just inspiring to people. And we had to be very prescriptive, and here's how you do that, and using the resources that Wisconsin had available. So, but maybe just a quick, what does it involve? And Lisa will talk more about that in a minute, but it's really an opportunity to understand the importance of shoreline restoration management, but there's also incentives. I mean, each of those practices you saw, and we'll again go through those, you can get up to $1,000 for each of those practices, but remember that it has to be a cost share. There has to be a commitment on the part of the landowner to that practice. So there's a 75-25% split, if you will. The state will pay 75% of that, up to $1,000 for each practice. And 90% of that money has to be spent on implementing the actual practice itself. And you have to make a commitment. You've got to maintain that for 10 years. So there are some, I think, very positive requirements, but it's not onerous by any means. And we were probably eligible, and Pam Toshner's on the line here too, could correct me, but we were probably eligible for up to 25,000, but we got, and you'll see in a minute, you know, a good third, more than a third of that. So there are significant dollars available for lake associations and organizations to do this. So I think to talk more about what's involved, let's just talk about what the Healthy Lakes program is and what some of the elements are, and I'll turn it over to Lisa, who did just a spectacular job of explaining this to our landowners.
Okay, so a lot of you probably have heard about the program, but if not, the Healthy Lakes and Rivers, it's rivers now as well. Their goal is to protect and improve the health of Wisconsin lakes and rivers by increasing shoreland property owner participation in habitat restoration and erosion and runoff control. So essentially there's kind of 3 different zones that are focused when it comes to healthy lakes and rivers. You have the inland lake zone, which is in the lake. And then as you move up towards the cabin or towards the house, you have your transition zone. So that's kind of your shoreland area that you're interested in maybe doing a restoration. And then as you go up a little bit further, that's your upland zone. So within that area is, you know, some potential roof runoff or some water coming down a driveway, and you want to try to stop that before it's entering the lake. So next slide.
You bet.
So as we kind of have already insinuated a little bit with these practices, there's 5 different practices that are covered within the plan. The first one there is in the water is the fish sticks, and Dick had mentioned that earlier. So it's basically bringing in wood for fish habitat. It just provides a lot of great overall habitat in general. And there are all kinds of different permits and things you need to go through with the DNR to make those happen. The second one in the middle there within the transition zone, that's the 350 square foot native planting. So there's a lot of information on how to put one of those in along your shore. The third one, if you kind of go to the top left, that's going to be your diversion. So again, if you've got roof water coming down or something coming off the driveway, you want to take that and divert it into a infiltration area, which would be like number 4. So you're stopping that water and everything that's going with it before it hits the lake. And then number 5 on the top right is our rain garden. So kind of similar thing. You're grabbing some of that runoff that's coming down and putting it into a small rain garden type area a little bit further up.
Lisa, I might comment too that the grant provides for these kind of practices when 1,000 feet of the high water mark. So you've got, it looks like here that everything has to be right near the shoreline. That's important for these, but you've got some space to make sure this works. So.
Yep, good point. And so as far as the plan goes and who can apply, eligible sponsors. So if you're a lake association, a qualified lake association, you can. You could talk to your local township, your village, your county, or you're even interested in just doing this yourself. You don't want the funding, that's easy to do as well. And a lot of these practices are meant to be do it yourself. So yeah, you got a lot of options there to play with. Great. And in the top right there on the slide, that's the Healthy Lakes website. So if you're interested in finding out more specifics on that, check it out.
And I really underscore that it's a really good set of really the how-to to make this work. So it's a great resource. You know, just kind of continuing on, we'll get back into more some of the site visits in a minute, but you know, this is again engaging the landowners. It became so important. You know, you've got a lake association, a lot of volunteers. We really had to have a point person, so I got volunteered and happy to do it. But I want to point out there was more than one person. I know she can't be on the call today, but the president of the Lake Association, Melissa Malik, was just like my right-hand partner, co-partner to do all this work. And so she was, as representing the Lake Association, very involved in making sure that we met with the landowners and they understood. We spent a lot of time biking around the lake and on kayaks and canoes and in pontoons, meeting with lake owners. It's just so important to have somebody that's really the lead person. I'm a strong believer in the prime mover theory, and so I took that role as the contact person and to help kind of drive the grant process forward. Real important to have that, somebody that has the passion, interest, and hopefully some time to do that. We just made sure the landowners continued, got oriented to this this grant opportunity and the opportunity, more importantly, around the lake. As Lisa said, not everybody took advantage of the grants, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But we send emails, we send newsletters out. We did website announcements on our website. There are a lot of in-person connections. And again, we'll talk more about the intensity of that. We had to do this over the last summer months during COVID. So it became an interesting exercise of in-person meetings. Our Lake Association meeting was just absolutely critical. And as I said, having someone like Linda Anderson come and do a presentation on what aquascaping and doing the native plantings on the shoreline, what they really look like. She has a beautiful example of what she did in Shell Lake that was just inspiring to people. So we talked about real experiences. It sparked that interest and inspiration, and really was really a catalyst in doing that. I might also note that fortunately we had a task force that worked on the getting ready for the pre-application and the application of the grant. And that was the past Lake Association presidents that helped drive the process. And we had some weekly Zoom meetings for quite a while to really make sure that we had all of our ducks in the row in terms of organizing and making it happen. So two things I would emphasize here is having someone that's a lead, and also having the force of people that have some good long history with the Lake Association or the lake itself is important. Lisa, you want to talk about those, our concentrated site visits?
Yeah. So site visits, if you recall, 2020 was kind of crazy for COVID, and I couldn't wait to get out of the office and get away from the Zoom meetings and get away from everything. I miss not seeing people. I miss not having workshops. So this was an exciting time for me to just get out and see people again. And fortunately, with site visits, we were able to still do that, social distancing, having masks on, and making it safe. So Dick did a really good job of coordinating everything, working with everybody's schedules to try to get out and meet when we could. So to make it efficient, we tried to get as many people involved in each site visit as we could. Dick was at pretty much all of them. As he mentioned, Melissa Malik, she's the president, so she came out for a few of them as well, and then Linda Anderson joined. And again, kind of discussed some of her experience with the plants that she used and she recommended. And my intern came out too, and he learned a few things as well. Yeah. So overall, we would meet about 30 to 40 minutes, and basically we would just kind of go over, okay, what are your concerns? What do you have going on? We'd kind of do a walkthrough, starting down by the lake and moving upward or upland toward the cabin or toward the house. And in most of them, it was pretty obvious as soon as we pulled up in the pontoon, kind of what they were going to be interested in. We talked about the options. So everybody seemed to be a little bit different, but it was a good idea to be honest with everybody. I didn't want to say things that probably weren't really going to work out for them, just because everybody was a little bit different. But we did go through the different options of what was available, what would work, what might not really work, or this is just not going to work with Healthy Lakes because it's too big of a project and it wouldn't be covered. So I think we all kind of learned a little bit, and going through this, kind of worked with Pamela a little bit on some quick questions if we were in the field, and she was really helpful with getting some quick answers if we needed them. It also created some neighbor interest. All of a sudden the neighbor would come over and say, what are you doing? Or you could kind of see them peeking behind the tree. Oh, who's over there? So kind of sparked some of their interest and got a couple extra on board, I think, that way. And one thing that I think is important is trying to use your local folks when possible, right? Giving them the business. And in our part of the state, that's a little bit difficult. I know people say, can you just give me a list of people to do this? And that's hard. I know some parts of the state, it's a little bit easier, but we try to do our best in promoting local contractors, local native plant nurseries, things like that. And we do have an enormous amount of resources out there for people that are just have no idea what they're doing with this kind of thing. And I'll show you that in a minute, but I do want to give kudos to all the resources that are available to making this as easy as possible for everybody.
Yeah, and Lisa, I might add too that we did some virtual benchmarking of other really successful lake associations, like Jim Gilliam up at Minnesooing, who's done an amazing job with the sanitary district around Minnesooing in terms of his grant work. So, and we tapped into, virtually as much as we could what other organizations have done just to build that learning curve. So and you hear this I think at the bottom is very important. Start planning earlier than you even want to, because the earlier you can get going on getting ready for a lake plan, and particularly the grant work is important. We really, it was an intense process, but we actually got our grants in and we were ready ahead of time, so that's important.
Mhm. So when we met with when I met with the landowners, we, took some pictures, so some good befores and afters so we can compare. But I'd say a lot of them kind of looked like this. Wouldn't you agree, Dick?
Yeah, exactly.
People were mowing, but now they're kind of like, we don't really want to keep doing that. We want to enhance the shoreline. I have a little bit of a slope, and I can notice some of the water going down. So, what are my options? And these three in general, or in particular, decided to do the 350 square foot planting, which is going to look pretty awesome once they get these projects done. And then they were excited. And then this is where Linda also kind of talked about some of the plants that, she used on her shoreline. And again, there's all these resources out there to show how to do these projects. Next slide. So this one was a little bit more complicated. This, on the picture on the left where the truck is, that's actually a driveway in front of it. Of course, it doesn't look like much because it's pretty dry right there, and it hadn't rained for a long time, but he had mentioned when it did rain, all that rain was coming down the driveway and hitting the cabin and kind of pooling, making a big mess. So I decided to kind of work with a diversion project on this part. And then if you actually kind of go around the corner of that cabin, it brings you around it and it drops off. There's a big drop off hill, which thankfully is vegetated. But in that area where it's kind of sandy and nothing's really there, we're gonna have them put in a rain guard in there to help direct more of that water that's coming down and capturing that water up on that higher sloped area. And he is actually going to probably be working with his neighbor, it sounded like. His neighbor's got some equipment. So again, it just kind of sparks some interest in getting help with your neighbors. So I think that's awesome that this is going to be a good one to see how it ends up.
And just to underscore that one person wanted to do this, talk to another person, suddenly we've got more people interested, and it was just sort of became kind of this connectivity between and a little bit of competitiveness, good competitiveness, like, well, if you're going to do that, I might want to do that too. So friends talk to each other and really got engaged. So it's a good point, Lisa. Next slide.
Yep. So this one, you're probably wondering, well, what's wrong with this? There's nothing wrong with this one. This guy he had it going on. He knew what was going on. He used to be a biologist, and he just kind of was like, well, what can I do? What else should I be doing? He stopped mowing, which is kind of the first step in trying to get a restoration going. That's the easiest thing to do, just stop mowing. And he started incorporating native plantings along his shoreline the last couple of years. And he actually worked with, I think it was Burnett County Land and Water Conservation, and got his plants and grass seedlings through that department. So this was one where he just said, yeah, I think I'm okay. I don't really think I want to use the money. I'm fine with just doing this myself. So I think this was a great one too.
And it's an example, Lisa, before this is one that was mowed down to the shoreline. So, and this is what happens when you start to really think about what can you do differently.
Mm-hmm. So next one. So I kept talking about resources. These are just a few of them that the landowners were using a lot of. I know Dick looked at these a lot. I looked at these a lot. They're I don't know. I couldn't say enough about them. Each of the practices has this fact sheet. So it kind of gives how much things cost, how to install practices, where to find more information on the plants. And then there's a whole companion guide for the whole grant and what that all entails, frequently asked questions. So there's resources out there, definitely can find them.
I want to give a shout out to the upper right-hand corner you have is Washburn County has actually, you can buy plantings through the county at a pretty good price. And so again, kudos to Washburn County for making that available to landowners. It was another good resource. So where do you buy? The challenge is to make sure you're calculating how much you need. And again, these guides will help you estimate how much you need to put in these plantings. So it's a great resource.
And going off on that too, most counties actually have a tree, shrub, and maybe a wildflower sale. So if you're not sure, call your land and water department, because a lot of them across the state do have them. And I know if you're interested in like a lot of trees, the DNR has a big spring sale as well.
Great. Should we move to questions, Lisa? Again, Derek, questions popping up about this first phase of really cultivating interest with the lake community.
We've got a number of questions here. We'll pick out a couple that are pertinent right now. We might cover the rest later. So when you're identifying erosion issues or sites around the lake, kind of who did that? Do you have a consultant do that? Did you do that through the county or just landowner visits?
Well, we have a very observant members of our lake association, and you could just tell there's erosion. They were seeing some of their shoreline kind of begin to collapse a little bit, and so it was pretty obvious. We did not use a consultant. I think Lisa and Linda going around could also spot some of these erosion issues. So we've got we're blessed with some really knowledgeable people in our lake about maintaining the shoreland. So it was a constant observation for our own landowners. So, but we did not use outside resources for that. Lisa, other than again Lisa and Linda observing that as well. Any other question? Another question?
The next question is about kind of getting back to communicating with landowners out there. And I guess I'll expand on a little bit, but you always have your early adopters out there. How are you guys kind of approaching people that aren't the early adopters to kind of reach out to them and get their interest?
Yeah, in this process, there was a lot of people interested. We had 19 landowners interested initially, and there were those that were really gung-ho to go ahead, and that is your early adopters. And I think the conversations they had with their neighbors, and I think Lisa alluded to it, that really helped them move forward. I also think that we'll be going through another round of these conversations, and as people complete their work or get into their plantings, we're going to have other people that are going to be very, very interested. So I think it's going to be, not I think, but I know it's going to be a constant keeping this in front of folks and encouraging people, because you need those early adopters, but there's a lot of people that came along behind that. So Lisa, any thoughts on that?
No, I think just anything you can do to reach out to the new landowners, email, just a simple stopping by and trying to talk to them and what their interests are, on their shoreline. Yeah. Just making that initial contact.
I think also that it's important to note that because we had so many early adopters, we didn't get initial uptake some years ago on this, but because there was a good nucleus of early adopters that really did begin to spawn more interest. And I can't say enough for Lisa and Linda for coming out and doing a presentation about what this, visually showing people what it could look like. So great questions.
All right, we'll hold questions right now. We've got about 15 minutes left here. Dick, okay. So I'll let you guys cover phase 2.
We're going to cruise. This was the whole phase 2 was really the grant preparation, and I call it, coordinating, it's like herding cats, because, and that's, I'm not trying to be derogatory, it's just the reality of most, landowners are all over the place. I mean, they're not always up there, so staying connected was a real challenge, and it really took that personal interaction that Lisa's talked about to be really make this work. as we said, we had a number of landowners interested, but the ones that really expressed continued interest got more than one visit. And that we just had to prioritize our time. As I've said before, we really talked about the benefits of native plantings, you know, to really protect the lake, why that's so important. And they've heard that message before in our lake association. Having the chair and the point person or facilitator was really important to keep the process moving into the grants. Zoom was critical during this time to be able to keep in touch with people. We really did a lot of coordinating written plans with the landowners and creating templates. So taking things from the Wisconsin guide or creating some of our own templates, like here's how you fill this out. So it became really easy for people. I actually did kind of a, here's the template you want to fill out for the grant, and talk with them directly about doing that. And so that actually went very well. They did a great job on that. And we set some due dates, and they were ahead of the grant deadlines, and because we wanted to make sure we got things done on time, and that was critical. You've got to have that due date. So it gives you time to even make potential changes before the grant's actually required. We reviewed those plans thoroughly through our Lake Association, and again with Lisa's eye on that as well. And the results were we had 8 landowners with 12 practices that are moving forward. Again, there's more people that are doing practices, but these are the ones that are actually in the grant process. And thank you, Pam, and the state of Wisconsin. We've been approved for almost $10,000 for this grant. So we're off and running with a good core nucleus of folks. Lisa, anything you want to add?
No, not really on that one.
Okay. Now, just some examples of kind of what's in the grant plan. Actually, when Lisa talked about the landowner with the cabin and the runoff, I mean, this is an example of what he put together. It's a little small print, but the point is these red circles are where his rain gardens are going to go, and how he's going to do is, how he's going to slow the infiltration down. So he had this picture for each of his practices. So it is required that you put some picture of what you're going to do, kind of a diagram and a schematic of that. So this is like the ultimate. Here's one that's a little more. It's all to scale, but it's hand done. And but it's clear where that practice is going to go into the landowner's property. This is an example of, and we showed you a picture of this kind of early on. This landowner's, and we've got a number of them already prepped their land to kill off the grass and get the soil ready for plantings for this spring. So it's a very active process on our lake. In that grant, again, just the pictures, the before pictures had to go into the grant application. This is kind of a beginning picture, and we'll have to show more pictures through the process of the reporting on the grant. Again, we put together a template of just how do you, with resources behind that, how to determine costs for things, whether it's purchase material and services, your contract labor, and then your volunteer labor, which is so important because you need to contribute to the overall cost of the project. But the state allows you $12 an hour for your time in doing things like plantings and installation. So that's an easy way to make your contribution to the grant itself. So that's just examples of what needed to go in the grant process itself during this second phase to get it ready for submission. And I just wanted to comment too in this, I actually went into this with a little bit of concern where we're going to get pushback from landowners. Like they felt like, oh, the county's coming out to survey my land, and it's going to be a lot of regulation. And we really didn't get that. In fact, I want to again compliment Lisa and Linda with their approach was much more advisory and more honest about what would work and what wouldn't work. And I think that people really appreciated that authenticity. So the reasons that landowners opt out, some said, I can afford to do this on my own, so I use the money for someone else who needs the grant. And now that, another one said, now that I know about soft practices, using plantings versus hard practices, and this is Linda's a quote, they said, rather riprap, I'm not gonna do riprap, that's actually, I can save some money by doing some of the soft practices. And that landowner actually has already prepared his shoreline for plantings, is not even gonna require a grant. There's a little bit of, I don't really want government, quote unquote, looking over my shoulder. And that's a little more of that independent nature, like I'm gonna do it myself. But it was a minority of opinion. And when, the shoreline visits, sometimes we realized there really wasn't much they had to do. They've already got native plantings coming up, so there's no need to apply for a grant. And some were concerned about just the time to maintain. The watering is probably the significant thing. You've got to water these plants. So how do you do that and make sure that someone is up doing that? Or in the case of some of us, we're going to be setting up a sump pump system that will come up from the lake to actually water our plantings. Now phase 3. So we've submitted our grant. We're moving forward with implementing. So you can see the kind of the checklist of things that on a broad scale that we need to do. We've gone through our Lake Association approvals and required us to make sure we're demonstrating that we are an official organization. They reviewed it. We've defined who our grant officer. You have to have an official officer, and my recommendation is pick somebody that's on the executive committee. So our vice president of the Lake Association is our grant officer, and I'm the grant contact. So I'm a little bit of the driver, but we've got official people that are done. So our application was in on time. We met the requirements for the state, so we went through that review. We continued to communicate with our lake biologist, Pamela Toshin, with questions and kind of where we were, and that was really, really helpful to know that we're coming in with this grant. And we've gotten the approval for the grant allocation, and we're communicating that now on our website and emails to the landowners and the rest of the Lake Association. Now into that phase that we've got to obtain the plantings and materials and trying to coalesce what's the best way to do that. Can we do some things together? So we're in that process right now. And so again, securing those resources. As Lisa said, there are some local resources that can help with some of the plantings, but we want to make sure they know about native plantings. Taking photos is going to be really important, so we document the process we're making, and then tracking our purchases to make sure we get the reimbursement accurately, that we're tracking those purchases. And I just want to remind people that, those of you that know it, you really can't get reimbursed until the grant's approved. So we expect once the grant is approved and signed, we'll actually be able to get those reimbursements for the expenses. And we plan to send continued updates to the DNR, to Wisconsin Water Extension Division, to the county like Lisa and Wisconsin Washburn County Lakes and Rivers Association, just because they've been involved. We want to keep them involved, and I'm sure questions will come up for those folks. Let me stop there. Lisa, did I miss anything?
No, I just wanted to make one comment going back to the securing your resources. So that's why planning early is super important. If you're looking to use a landscaper or somebody else, and you just you want to get this project in this year, and you're trying to get a hold of somebody, it could be pretty hard to just get them into their schedule to make it work for you. So that's why planning early is very important, and kind of getting a plan of what you're looking at doing even before the grant is awarded.
Yeah, and I'll just put kudos in for the grant we got for doing the education and planning. It's kind of forced us to put together a full lake plan, this being one integral part of that. So it's just a continued building process. Again, it's in a little bit of closing here, I just really want to express gratitude to particularly the leaders. You stand on the shoulders of those that went before you, and you can see the names of Melissa, Eric, Jim, Stu, Tom, Fred, others that have been so involved as past presidents and leaders in our Lake Association. You just need that leadership, and they've been a real catalyst to get us to this point. Lisa, again, I can't say enough for Lisa's involvement with us. Linda has been a superstar in sense of really giving people direction about what native plantings might work for them. As I mentioned, Jim, it's another one of those good benchmarking organizations, and Pam and her staff have been absolutely phenomenal in providing advice and counsel as we've gone through this. So deep thanks to them. So with that, here's our contact information. I'll leave this up for a minute. And the bottom is, as Lisa mentioned, this is a great resource for those of you that are considering it to just start reading through that material. It is just absolutely excellent. And so, Lisa, did I miss anything?
Nope, I think you got it.
Okay, so we're open to any more questions, Derek, that have come through.
All right, we got a few questions here. I'm going to kind of combine some of them together here. So some of them have to do with the Shoreland buffer and kind of the multi-purposes of those buffers. So part of the question is, do buffers prevent erosion? And also, were you able to measure any reductions in runoff from these narrow strips along the lake shore?
Lisa, do you want
Yeah,
to?
so the buffers or the 350 square foot planting or bigger, they will help prevent the erosion. Again, each site is a little bit different. You could have some wave action coming in, so that may not be the most, best practice to be looking at. So every piece is a little bit different. Each land piece could be totally different than the neighbor. And as far as, I think the question was output for phosphorus, we haven't had any installations yet, so this was just kind of their first phase. So, but overall, yes, they should be holding that phosphorus back from entering the lake.
And that's a really good point, because that, I think we all know the phosphorus is just like the accelerant for this, one of the accelerants of nutrients for this, and it's clearly linked to things that can run off. And there's natural sources as well. And so as we've monitored that more consistently, we're seeing some variations, some increases, can't always pinpoint what it was. And I know it will be important for us to get enough data points over a longer period of time to really evaluate, okay, are all the things that we've done are they really working, or is this seasonal periodicity that we just can't always control, but we're counting on this restoration work to really make a difference in that. And that's probably one of our areas of concern. So, and as Lisa said, this is our first round of this, so I don't think we have that. We can't quantify the results yet. It'll take us a little time to do that, but great question.
Right, and they have multi-functions. I mean, you're talking about the runoff, you're talking about the erosion, you're talking about wildlife, so there's talking about natural beauty. So you got a lot going on there. Each site's unique, like Lisa said. So one popular question here is, how do you persuade people that love the look of their manicured lawns?
Well, I don't believe in criticism, negative criticism. That doesn't work, and we didn't do that. We just kept talking about how important it is to slow the runoff down and use these examples of plantings as a way to do that. And it kind of just took. I mean, I'm just amazed at the amount of people that are not mowing down to the shoreline now in our lake. And it's, I think people are really getting the fact that this is an important variable in slowing runoff. So, and we also have sort of a natural blessing, I guess, is that there's a lot of new properties that are set back and have kept a lot of the shoreline intact without mowing. It's become a little less popular to mow, and I think, frankly, people just don't want to spend the time doing that if they can stop doing this. So it's sort of been a natural pickup, but it required us at the Lake Association's meeting to be honest about, mowing down the lake. The issue is grass clippings and things flowing in your lake. And so when you talk about that as one of those variables, I think you can't confront people on that. It's more inspiring them to try to do the right thing is my best answer. And we're lucky with some really good landowners that have done that.
Well, and having 30% participation in your first year is amazing. So that's very, very, very good. Dick, can you back your slide up to your contact page and leave that up there?
Yeah.
Kind of getting away from the immediate shoreline, is what have you looked at as far as upstream conditions, watersheds, and is there any money to pay for wetland restorations outside the immediate lake area?
Boy, that's a little out of my pay grade in terms of what's available. We've not looked at that as the next opportunity, but it's a really good question, and I think that will be part of the consideration in our lake plan, because we are a seepage fed lake. I mean, literally it flows out of some streams and springs and some wetlands. So that is a consideration for us as to what impact that might be having on our lake, but we've not gone deep into that yet. And I'd love to have an answer to that question. And so I don't know if Pam is available to even make a comment on that. That would be great. Pam, are you there?
Hi, yes, I am here. And there are wetland restoration grants as well as shoreland restoration grants that provide more funding than like a Healthy Lakes best practice would. It's part of the Surface Water Grant Program. And the due date is November 1st. So it's within the same realm of these grants, just a different category.
Yeah. Thank you, Pam. And I think for us, it's taking one piece at a time. And as I said, as we put together this lake plan, we will probably begin to address where does that fit into our, our phases of things we need to do to protect the lake. So the wetlands are just essential as filtration systems for lakes. So it will be a consideration. Great question. Thank you.
And it's a plug, for some of the local places, talking to your local DNR, lakes biologist like Pamela is up in the Northwest, or your local one is a great resource. Also your county shops like Lisa. And I also work for a county LCD, is that we're very good at being frugal with money and digging up funds from all sources across federal, state, local stuff too. So talk to your local people, talk to your DNR, and they can usually get some type of a plan together. There's grants to get lake plans done for your watershed. So
Great.
how do you guys handle anything like muskrat issues in some of these buffers? Have you run into that on other lakes, Lisa, or?
I haven't. Maybe you have, Derek. I don't have too many of those issues here.
We've had beaver issues that dam up the outflow. So, I actually, to be honest, I actually talked to a professional beaver trapper that is available if we need to do that. The beavers disappeared for some reason, but I tell you, every night I would clean it out, and the next morning I'd have to clean it out again. It's been more beaver issues than it's been muskrats. We have muskrats on the lake, but they have not been a problem. They tend to go into areas that are a little more remote, so they've not been an issue for us.
All right, we're at the end of our time, but we do have a 30-minute break after us, so we'll take a couple more questions here before popping off here and finishing up. Are you doing any phosphorus monitoring in the lake?
Yes, on a regular basis. We sample on a regular basis in accordance with the schedule that Wisconsin's put out, and get our readings back and graph them out and give them to the whole Lake Association, talk about what that really means. So it's a very important element to keep track of. We don't do nitrates, but we do phosphorus.
Is that something the members are doing through the Citizen Lake Monitoring Network, or how are you guys implementing?
We're doing it through the Citizen Lake Monitoring Network. I'm actually the official water quality monitor. So I'm out there in the depot, pick up the samples and getting them into the state. So it's been really, really helpful. And what I love is that Wisconsin will then send you back a report and even continue to classify your lake based upon some of those readings.
So that's a great program for, if you guys aren't familiar, through the DNR and university combo. They offer assistance with that monitoring for lakes to do that. So
yeah, it's called the SWIM system. Yep.
I'm not sure if you guys can address this or not. This question: is it true that each lake association has up to $25,000 available to property owners renewable each year? So I think that probably would have been a question for Pamela. She just had to leave.
Yeah, the only thing I can say is I know we were eligible up to that for this grant. And the other, what I don't know is, we can be adding people into the grant, but I think you have to do it during the opening grant process. So while the grant is open, you can continue to add people. So whether we can continue to add people even after we've gotten approved, that's still a question, but we are eligible for up to that level.
Yeah, you can add a one-time add-on. So if you get 4 more landowners that want to jump on board with this, they can come on.
Good, yeah, but it's a one-time. Thank you for adding that. Yep.
And again, in general, I would just contact some of the DNR lakes biologists and local county LCD, because they may have other grants that may fill in that gap. Yeah. Outside the Healthy Lakes grants too, that do the same thing. So
right.
With that, there's a couple more questions on there. I apologize, I'm not going to get to all of them, but the contact information is on the screen here. Also, you can message Dick and Lisa directly through the agenda at the conference here. Just go to their page, click on their name, and you'll see their contact information. Other than that, that is it. And I thank everyone for attending. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Dick.
You're very welcome. And please, if you're considering doing a grant, go ahead. It's worth the effort.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.